Good morning. Please welcome Linda Chipperfield, Board of Directors for the U.S. Green Building Council.
Good morning. Thank you for coming on this Friday. Today, I have the pleasure of kicking off what promises to be a very interesting discussion between two very accomplished women. The topic of this session is climate adaptation and an economy that grows. The nexus of the discussion of climate change issues and economic vitality in the hands of our two speakers today is sure to be enlightening. Over the past 2 years, Deputy Secretary of Agriculture Krysta Harden has brought her experience, expertise, and ingenuity to bear at USDA, working to strengthen the agriculture economy of the United States. With family background in farming and years of public service in Washington, Krysta is uniquely positioned to support America's farmers and promote sustainable agricultural practices. Joining Krysta this morning is Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and the Environment, Katherine Hammack. A Leadership Award winner this year at Greenbuild, Katherine is responsible for policy and oversight of environmental and sustainability initiatives for the Department of the Army, as well as design, construction, management, and maintenance of Army facilities, among other things. She's a busy woman. Katherine is credited with the establishment of the Army's Net Zero program and the Office of Energy Initiatives. She's been a strong and successful advocate for the pursuit of LEED for Army facilities, changing the face of the building stock associated with the largest branch of the U.S. military. Moderating today's discussion is Brendan Owens, USGBC's Chief of Engineering. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Deputy Secretary Harden and Assistant Secretary Hammack to the stage.
Hi guys, happy Greenbuild Friday. I've been looking forward to this session all week. I feel like the opportunity that we have over the next hour is something that when I started working at USGBC, I didn't think we might ever get to have. So this is really wonderful, and thank you both for your time. I've known Katherine for many, many years, and talking to Secretary Harden behind the stage here. Both of them spent at least part of their time this week outside the U.S. So Secretary Harden just got back from Ghana.
Right?
And ma'am, you weren't really clear on where you were, but I'm sure it was someplace interesting. So let's get into it. I did a fair amount of research for this session because I have to say that I thought I knew what USDA did because, my yogurt, right? And
you did eat. You've been eating, right?
Yes, exactly, right?
You knew that part.
So I have to say I had no idea, really just flabbergasted by the amount of stuff that you guys do and how broad and deep the work that the Agriculture Department is responsible for in every facet of everything basically every facet of everything that we do every day. So can you take us through that? Because I feel like that's something that I learned, and maybe there's a lot of people in the audience who haven't had a chance to go on their website and just get completely blown away by how much time you can spend there. So can you give us a sense of what the USDA is all about?
I'll try to in a very short time. And first of all, I'm going to say thank you. I know it is unusual to have the U.S. Department of Agriculture at this meeting, and it's my first one, so I'm excited to be here. Very happy to be a part of it, but it does make a lot of sense, and I hope through the course of our discussion that folks will better understand that. USDA, I think our core function, the one that people think about, is farmers and ranchers, helping them with safety net issues and staying on the land and producing our food some folks understand our food safety role. They're used to seeing USDA choice or prime on their meat, so they recognize that role we play. Many folks participated or have kids or grandkids who've enjoyed school lunch. Of course, that is USDA, so our nutrition programs, WIC, SNAP, those kinds of programs, I think, once you remind people. Most don't realize, even in this town, that the Forest Service is our largest agency. They don't realize that how much 192 million acres are controlled by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have a robust trade effort as well. Offices in about, I think we have 93 offices around the world. I just came back from the one in Ghana, as you mentioned, doing trade, promoting U.S. efforts. We're also very much involved in global food security. We work hand in hand with sister agencies on those kinds of things. We do a number of things with marketing of agriculture, farmers markets, our regional efforts, local food production, organic certification for food, some of the things that if you stopped and thought about, you might realize that. Robust energy effort. We do a lot of energy work, a lot of research on a variety of different areas. We have about 100,000 employees. People are always surprised how big we are. Not like DOD, but we have a big footprint in almost every county. We have an office in my hometown in Southwest Georgia. USDA is the federal government. We're the face in many areas around the country. So our work is, if you live in a small town, if you're involved in rural America or you know someone that is, we've touched you with our housing programs. Our housing portfolio is bigger than HUD's. We have a bank that gives loans money to different folks, communities, and small towns and others around the country. We would be probably the 6th or 7th largest bank in the country if we were actually characterized as a bank. So if you want to do business in rural America, you're going to do it with USDA. And a lot of people live in rural America. We just kind of forget that. I could go on and on, but I hope that gives some idea of how we touch everyone. And if you did have breakfast today or you want to have lunch later, you can think that we had some role in that.
Great, thank you. There is more. There's a lot more. But in the interest of getting to the point of how this conversation came together, the green building industry has a ringer at the Army with Secretary Hammack. And my understanding is that Secretary Vilsack, I guess your boss.
My boss.
And Ms. Hammack had an exchange about some work that they've been doing, and that was the impetus for this conversation to get started, and why this is an appropriate. This is a great venue for the USDA to be a part of. And that conversation you had with Secretary Vilsack was about wood construction technologies. And one of the things that USDA has just completed is something called the Tall Wood Building Prize. And I'm an engineer by background, and the idea of a tall wood building is something that really just gets me going. So can you share with us what's going on with that?
I will. We were talking backstage about how the secretary my boss called the secretary. She was probably wondering, why is this guy calling me? We do a lot of work with DOD in a number of areas with veterans and energy and other ways. But we have a forest products lab as well, and we do a lot of research on these issues. And we came together with the Softwood Lumber Board and other partners to create a prize for a competition for folks to actually do work and present proposals to us for tall buildings. And we just made the awards in September. 2 of them, we have a total of $3 million. They're sharing that amount. There's a winner in Portland, Oregon, and one in New York City.
New York City.
New York City.
That's
great. Right across from the High Line. It's going to be a great building. So we're very excited to be involved in this, and you offer a little seed money out there. You get people excited, get people talking about this. They don't expect it to come from the USDA, and maybe the softwood lumber folks make more sense than us, but I think there's a lot of curiosity, and we're very excited about these 2 projects. So they'll be on both coasts. I think a 12-story building is one proposal for the one in Oregon. So we're very excited about both of those.
Yeah, and 12 stories of wood. That's just the coolest thing in the world, right?
I see smiles here.
Yeah, because we're geeks, right? All of us here I am. You guys are probably cool. So let me ask, because I think that, Ms. Hammack, the Army might have the opposite problem of USDA, where everybody thinks they know what you do and has a pretty good handle on it. But I know that that's probably not the case. So just basically the same question. Can you share what your portfolio is and what you do at the Army?
Certainly. The Army has about 1 billion square feet of vertical infrastructure. So we are always in the process of either repairing, replacing, demoing buildings. And so we certainly look at construction techniques, construction technologies. And CLT, compressed laminate timber, was something that we started hearing more about. It's something that has been used in Australia and Europe for quite a few years, over 20 years, but really hasn't caught on in the United States. So we decided to partner with one of our partners, Lend-Lease. Don't mean to advertise them, but they're a great partner who helped us build a lodging property in Alabama out of compressed laminate timber. 4-story structure, 63,000 square feet. It currently is, I think, the longest totally built out of CLT building in the United States. And it's going to be ready for occupancy in February. What was fascinating about it is we were able to take the BIM model and send that to the CLT manufacturer, who put it together as almost panelized construction. It came like an IKEA kit, and it was screwed together. So you poured the foundation, and you had these massive 3-foot-long screws screwing this building together, but there's no construction waste. So that's fascinating, number one. Number two, 47% less labor. Number three, 37% less time to construct, because you didn't have to worry about framing and other things, because it all came together, and it's going to be 27% more energy efficient. So when you look at all of those together, it's, why didn't we do this a long time ago?
So let me ask you a question, because I had a conversation with another Department of Defense person in a service that shall remain nameless, but I asked them why they didn't use wind power in their ships. So, yeah, and I got a pretty, pat on the head response, right? Because that's, we had a pretty good answer in reality. But it seems to me that maybe the most difficult challenge that you guys face with this project is saying yes when somebody walks in your office and says, "We're going to build you a wood building," right? Because that's it's not what we do here. It's not what we do in Alabama. I'm from Alabama. It's not what we do in Alabama, right? At least not for commercial buildings. So what was your thought process? Was it like a light bulb moment and say, yeah, we're going to do that because that's a cool thing, or a lot of investigation, code stuff? What were you looking at?
Certainly there's a lot of investigation. There are a lot of questions. In the military, we look at blast protection, we look at progressive collapse,
right.
We look at seismic, but there's a lot of data that is out there available from other countries. We also took it to our construction engineering research lab, who's done some work on it and some evaluation. And CLT lumber comes in 3-ply, 5-ply, 7-ply. It uses fast growth soft wood, but when you laminate it together, it's a pretty ruggedized structure. And one of the things that we found out, and this is partnering. We're going to try new technologies, and we do believe it is a responsibility of the Department of Defense to try some new technologies. I hate to say we'll try anything once, but we'll try anything once. If it doesn't work, we've learned, right. Let's move on. We'll publish the results. But this is an opportunity that everything seemed to be giving us a yes answer. So it was hard to come to a no. Now, what's interesting is there is probably more upfront engineering on this than there is in other cases. But once you have that design all set, The thought right now is it's actually going to be less costly. So we're evaluating the cost right now, but everything else seems to be coming in as a yes. And so if we can do something that's more cost effective, less taxpayer dollars, then we need to be doing that.
And the ability to jumpstart a market sector that could be inherently U.S.-based is something that I think is fascinating. And I think that type of collaboration, the synergy that exists between a pilot project like this and the work that you guys have been doing is something that's fantastic. And Ms. Hammack maybe undersold how much they're doing on energy. They have a net zero installation challenge that they've been really making great strides on. And there's a lot of ways that I think this conversation and the synergies and the overlaps between what USDA and the Army and DOD in general, but the Army specifically are doing, that we could go. I was at a meeting, it was a USGBC chapter event in North Carolina. And as part of the conversation that they were having, they were talking about climate adaptation, and there was a broad recognition. I think we heard it at the opening plenary from James Cameron, that food security and the challenges that we face as the climate is changing, and we're going to face drought and heat stress and floods and increasing levels of energy everywhere. I'm interested in your perspectives, ma'am, on the things that the green building industry can do to help on that particular issue, food security, and what we can do from a planning and an adaptation standpoint to be able to respond to some of the challenges that we're going to be facing.
So many. I want to step back just a little bit and just think about the other benefits, and it include climate and food production and global food security. When the housing market hit, just plummeted a few years ago, we lost about 1,000 sawmills across the country, about 300,000 jobs, billions of dollars of wages. You lost an industry, and you lost the ability, or almost an industry, not completely, but it was a very fragile industry, and you lost the ability to have these kinds of innovative, creative ways to use wood and keep jobs in the U.S. to be able to help our own climate and thus help with global food security. So it really is, we saw the tough times on the agriculture side in the 80s and 90s, and we know that innovation and creativity and looking for new markets, looking for new uses, helped our farmers and ranchers. It's the same thing in forest products. So this really is a way to bring a lot of good benefits, and one of the main results is helping the climate. You're right about disease, you're right about drought. I think this fire year, fourth worst, we've had 9 million acres, I think, impacted. Thousands of property damage, homes, people's livelihoods shattered, all these kinds of issues. And we know that the climate is changing. We do have to mitigate. We do have to adapt. We do need to look at ways on private lands as well as public lands. And clearly being able to have ways to keep our forests healthy, sustainable is very key. And this gives us a way to help do that. And by creating also a market to keep folks involved in these industries. So I think there are just so many different benefits. And obviously, they store carbon once they're built. That's the other kind of plus that we have. So there's so many steps along the way in this process that do help the planet, help the climate. Global food security, we are better. We are making some strides. I think in the 90s, it was around 19% of the population was food insecure. It's around 11 now. Just mentioned I came back from Ghana. You see firsthand in certain parts of the world how tight, how close people are to being food insecure. There are small subsistence farmers who are, not as food secure countries across the globe. So we do need to be thinking of ways that we can, as a global population, share research, share ideas, create new markets, new opportunities. A lot of that science and technology that are going to help with seed, going to help with the whole supply chain, so refrigeration, food storage, are issues that we have to address as well. This is not the only answer, but I think it is a big part of one. And I'm just very pleased that we can be creative, can be innovative, and talk about new technologies and how to use existing products that we already have, make some changes, make some adaptations that benefit in so many different ways.
Great, thank you. So, Ms. Hammack, the Secretary Harden brought up the issue of the carbon sequestration potential of things that grow out of the ground, right? And the typical paradigm for in the construction industry that we all came up in has been really heavily intensive materials, concrete and steel. And one of the things that has been really kind of shocking to me, not shocking, but sort of as I've come in to understand it, how we're pairing those materials, really, really high embedded energy materials, which are extraordinarily functional and extraordinarily useful in certain settings, with oftentimes using them in buildings that are only scheduled to last 15 or 20 years worth of, it's a strip mall, right? So it's going to be bulldozed in 20 years, but we've made it out of materials that can last hundreds and thousands of years. So there's a real mismatch in terms of the amount of energy and the useful life. And I think that one of the things that's interesting about the work that you guys are doing from a net zero installation standpoint is as you drive down energy use and the carbon intensity of the operations and maintenance of your installations, the thing that's left in terms of your carbon footprint is your construction, right? So the pie gets overall smaller, which is great. Good on you. Are you looking longer term at the way that you're building the rest of your portfolio to say, all right, as we drive this carbon number down on the operational energy, this is the rest of the carbon pie. We're going after that next. Was that part of the calculus you did with the wood building?
I hate to say no, but the honest answer is no.
It's great.
Because when we do something, we look at mission effectiveness and resiliency. And those are really our primary drivers.
Okay.
If you look at why the U.S. got away from wood buildings, it really has more to do with fire codes. Mm-hmm. So the advantage CLT has is it's very thick. It's not old growth timber. It's new growth timber, softwoods with thermoresins in them that give them great fire resistance. So we have building codes that are in our way of using a material that's more cost effective to build and could use local materials that would give us lower greenhouse gas emissions residual. So it's something when you look at the entire life cycle, there's a lot of opportunity there, but we have to, as an industry, push the envelope here. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think this tall building challenge is going to be interesting, because it's going to have to get waivers to codes in those markets that prohibit you from building a tall building out of wood. And so I think we need to look at where technology has moved so that the codes are no longer valid, mm-hmm. that allow you to do things that are smart for the industry. And I like the fact that this is a good use of the land. I like the fact that this is a good use to restart an industry and give the farmers and the timber industry an opportunity to have a product that's of value. I like the fact that it's something that we can grow in the United States with the resources we have available versus having steel shipped in from overseas or other materials that have a higher embodied energy content. And those are all valuable aspects of it. But for the Army, we're looking for prudent use of taxpayer money. Mm-hmm. So when we invest in a technology like this one, it has to be a win-win-win-win. So it has to be good for the Army, and that it gives us the kind of structure that is enduring. It has seismic characteristics that are valuable. It has soundproofing characteristics. It has blast resistance. It has fire resistance. It meets all the marks there. And at the same time, it's cost effective to construct. So it meets the cost characteristics, right. and at the same time it's good for the environment, that's the win-win-win. That's good all the way around. And I won't say really that the environmental characteristics drive it, but that heads us in the right direction, because that's sort of like the icing on the top.
Right.
And that's really what we'd like to see.
And I think that's a great point that you're making about codes, because one of the things I get to do at USGBC is work on the development of the programs that we sort of organize to transform markets. The LEAD is the one that has sort of created the green building industry, but we're now working in energy, we're now working in health and wellness, we're now working in landscape architecture. But a lot of times what we end up doing is seeing the implementation of a program like LEAD, which is intended to be voluntary in a regulatory setting. So a couple of years ago, we got together a group of folks to create a code that was intended to be regulation that was based on green building. And I'm interested from your perspective on the code piece, if there's things that the buildings industry can do to make it, because we've got a great big giant megaphone with LEAD. We can write stuff down, and the buildings industry responds to the signals that our members, through the creation of the LEAD program, put out there. Are there things that we can do to accelerate the rate at which projects like yours get off the ground? Or is there a partnership there that we can explore? Because I feel like this low carbon, domestic product feels to me like that maybe one more win to your win, ma'am. So on the codes and standard side, on the rating system side, on the cheerleading side, what else can we do?
Well, I think, first of all, it's educating. I think it's great to have a session here at this meeting, but it probably needs a broader audience. I think when you talk about with the general public, you're going to have a tall building made out of wood, and we saw that just in our competition. I'm just in the press around those winners. It's what? It's kind of like your question about why, the not using wind power in the ships. It's kind of like, yeah, sure, we're going to use wood, and kind of laugh and chuckle. Yeah. Not really expecting people all worried about codes. They're worried about safety. They're worried about how this might impact them. Do they want to work in a building with multiple stories that's made out of wood? So I think we have a lot of educating. I think there's been a lot of research, a lot of effort gone into the development of the product. It's obviously been used around the world more than it has here, helping to tell that story. I think, frankly, the Department of Defense being so involved adds some credibility. Because you have such high level of scrutiny, and you're not going to do anything that would jeopardize safety and resilience. So I think that is something that we just need to tell the story broader so it is better understood. I think this competition that we have will give very good real-world examples in 2 large cities where people are not thinking about all the other residual benefits possibly, like we do at USDA for creating a market for protecting our natural resources, keeping a timber industry viable, helping the landowner, all those things, helping to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Those are the things we're thinking about, but a consumer in an urban area may not be thinking about the same things.
Right.
So I think we need to be telling these stories in a different way, continuing the research, having some good examples. We're excited about the Huntsville example, having some real world examples here in the U.S. that I think our taxpayers and consumers can see. That's what will impact change, I believe, in regulation.
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting in what's going on around the world. This is a global market. So I think in Stockholm, they have a proposal, and I understand it's a project that's going to come up. It's a 34-story CLT building. Yep. In Australia, I think there's an 11-story that's already up. So as we see the opportunities and the learning around the world, we're a global economy, and USGBC or GBCI is a global organization. So I think we need to bring in the examples of what's going on around the world and learn from each other.
So that's a great point, because a lot of the outreach that you guys do outside the U.S. is you are in places where LEED projects already exist, right? So we have 150 countries that have a LEED project in one stage of development or another. Are there things that you've seen you've mentioned the couple projects in Sweden and in Australia. Are there things that you've seen from the traveling that you've done that we can bring back here and sort of, learn from the wisdom of the rest of the world?
Well, there are certainly places that are much more advanced. Canada, the UK come to mind as well, who have been looking at these technologies, and I think we need to be collaborating with them more often, helping to tell their story and having those examples. So I think that sometimes we play catch up, sometimes we're leading, sometimes we're following, but I think the collaborations with other industries and other supportive efforts that have been happening, we need to be aware of and to make sure we're telling the story. It is a small world, and we have to make sure that we understand the benefits, all the benefits here in the U.S.
Yeah, thank you.
And the Army has a construction engineering research laboratory, CERL, and they're doing some studies on the material itself, and those studies are going to be published within the next 6 months. And so that helps support the industry, that helps support the building science and the construction industry and the codes industry with the science behind the durability, the resiliency, and the opportunity there.
So let's switch gears. We talk a lot about CLT and wood buildings. I'd like to talk and spend some time on energy because you are doing, I don't know if you guys can see this or if we can get a tight shot of this. So I went on their website, USDA website. This is the list. It's actually really small. This is the list of all these things are different technologies that USDA is investigating for biofuels and power production. It is a huge
Brendan,
list.
hold it up again. Now they're doing a tight shot.
Right there? Right there? That's how many things, sorry, my hand's in the way here. That's how many different technologies they are investigating. They have research around all of those different things. And it's, it
I'm
ranges.
impressed you spent that much time on our website.
It was deep, right? So I really was kind of geeking out. It was really fun. Woody biomass, wind, switchgrass, sugarcane, something guayule. I've never even heard of that. Biomass, right? So all of these different technologies that you're investing in, from a sort of a new energy future, right? What do you see over the next 3, 5, 7 years coming out of this research from an energy perspective? Is there something on the horizon that you have your eyes on that you think is going to be something that we can promote and lead or get out into the hands of the other stuff that we're doing?
Well, clearly woody biomass, I think all the different sources for woody biomass for energy is something that is very exciting. We've seen great strides recently. I think we'll continue to see. And we also have on that list, it really is, a number of things that new markets for our landowners and producers. We're constantly looking for new, exciting new crops for rotations and protecting our soils, good soil health, protecting the environment. So our producers are always asking us for more. They're pushing, they're wanting more options. So, I think the woody biomass has probably the greatest potential. Algae is another area that's very exciting. Enzymes is another area that you see a lot of breakthroughs on. They're going to change the way we have energy and fuels and power. So, I don't know of one that's a standout, but I think there are a number that we're very close on. We collaborate a lot with researchers in the private sector and our land grant institutions, as well as at USDA. We have a couple of research arms as well. So I think it's just very exciting. It shows you, I think, the innovation and the creativity that you see in agriculture, you see from landowners wanting to use their land more productively, more sustainable, constantly looking for areas of improvement, but also the energy independence, I think, that drives a lot of our country's thinking and how do we have homegrown energy. We kind of overuse that sometimes, but I think that is one of the reasons that we continue to do this. So it's land-driven, it's market-driven, it's energy independence-driven, and I think we're going to not have a quick fix. There is just one answer. I think that's why that list is so long.
Yeah.
There's going to be multiple answers that we're going to change the way we have energy and power in our country, and a lot of it is going to come from our natural resources here.
Yes, of course, right. Are we going to see soldiers in straw hats tending biofuel crops?
I guess that image just went through my
Yeah,
mind.
I don't think that quite
No?
works, but
But you guys have big installations, right?
We do. We do.
Is the idea of a biofuel-based, where you're growing some of your fuel that's being used on the installation, is that being talked about?
we just converted, in partnership with industry, a coal-fired plant, an old coal-fired plant, to biomass. And so it's an old coal-fired plant that's now producing 60 megawatts of energy from biomass. It's located on an Army base. We only use 20 megawatts of it, so the rest of the energy is being used by the community. And it is taking the woody biomass from the timber industry, the refuse that used to be going into landfills. And I'll tell you, when we started up the plant, we got a big objection from the community because the thought was we're going to buy up all the firewood. And so we had to explain to people that this isn't firewood. This is the stuff that was going to landfill. This is the leftovers.
Now I have the image of lumberjacks the soldiers in lumberjack costumes.
No, that's not what it is.
Not that
But we do have a timber industry, and we do have forestry management inside of the Army, because we have 14 million acres of land. And so we have managed forests, and we do have the sustainable forestry practices that mean that you go in and you do some cutting of the undergrowth, and you do have to do something with that material. So having biomass facilities is great. Now, we do it on a resiliency standpoint. That's what we're focused on, is ensuring that we can support the mission of the United States Army and do whatever the president or this nation asks of us. So the ability to operate a base, should the power grid go down, is very interesting to us. So in Fort Drum, upstate New York, we were able to disconnect from the grid and run the base off of that biomass facility to ensure that we could be, that was 3 weeks ago.
But how long, what was the duration of the disconnect?
Well, we ran it for a week. But we have enough fuel for 3 months within 5 minutes of the base, either on the base or nearby. So the grid could go down for an extended period of time, and we'd still be able to run the base, and we'd still be able to provide power to the community. So that really is the resiliency of our installations and the resiliency of our communities that we're looking for. But the Army's intention is not to set ourselves up as a utility. We want to work in partnership with utilities, in partnership with the community. But we are looking at things like switchgrass. We are looking at some of the products that can be grown in arid environments without irrigation, that we have land that could be used for that purpose. But right now, the budgets don't allow us to invest in those facilities, so we're partnering. We're partnering with the private sector. We're partnering with the farmers. We're partnering with timber industry, where they're doing the hard work, so you're not going to see uniformed military out there cutting the grass or mowing down trees. But we're going to partner with industry to make sure that we're doing what's right and taking advantage of some of the developments that are going on.
So this question of resilience and mission continuity is something that I think is another place where I see direct synergies between what you guys are doing from a mission standpoint and the work that you guys have started. USDA has started these climate hubs, and the goal of the hubs is to help educate and provide guidance on drought and heat stress and flood and pests and changes in growing season. Give us a sense of how what the response to those hubs has been, and what we can expect to see come out of them as they emerge and get more prominently known.
Well, as you might imagine, in tight budget times, these are not brick and mortar hubs.
Right,
You know, it's really collaborations and coordination among research agencies and other groups, our partners, to provide information to farmers, ranchers, and landowners, foresters, others, how to use, how to mitigate, how to adapt, how to make the changes. One that was most telling to me was actually in Puerto Rico, and working, as they see the shorelines change, they see problems with fishing, And the impacts are just so impressive, and adapting to a changing climate as they're looking at industries really struggling. So what you're seeing is just the tools, the ideas, the information, the training, the tools that are needed to adapt to your own operation. My family farms in Georgia. I remember when we first brought irrigation in Georgia, I was like 4th grade, and that was a long time ago. But it was kind of a novelty to have major irrigation. Now you don't farm where I am, and you're probably the same in Alabama. Without irrigation, you just don't. But it's just so much hotter, it's drier, more extremes. You need new seed technology, you need farming practices, new crops. That's what we're providing to our landowners so they can make wise decisions. You're not farming the way your granddaddy did or your daddy did, and having to have all those tools that are needed to make those decisions. It's what our climate hubs are doing. And you know what, we find acceptance. Our farmers and rangers and landowners are very excited to have the information. They don't want to talk about climate change as much as they want to talk about the extreme weather changes and patterns. They understand that. They feel that at home. You're growing soybeans in North and South Dakota. You did not do that even a decade ago at the levels that we are. So we're seeing technologies change. We're giving farmers and rangers the tools, and they're also growing some of the new crops that are kind of exciting and doing new things some of the things we're talking about today. Can I just mention one thing that
Absolutely.
I want to go back?
I'm a little bit paralyzed in the number of things that I want to ask you guys about, so please.
Well, I just was going to talk about the collaboration. I think a lot of folks will tell me after you leave Washington, if y'all would just talk in Washington and work together, we would have more solutions. We work so closely with the Department of Defense in so many different ways. And it started with fuels, frankly. We have a relationship with the Navy. Biodiesel, which is made from recycled oil. You have a lot of installations that create a lot of waste oils that were going into landfills that can, just through an esterification process, you have a fuel, a biodiesel that can be used to help run a lot of the on-base equipment. We're not quite having it in the field yet doing combat, but on base. So there's just so many things we're doing. We work with NASA to get information on drought and extreme weather conditions. They have extensive research efforts. So I think there's a lot of work that's being done across the federal government to make sure that we are addressing these very tough issues that come from a changing climate, come from a changing environment for production, and thus existing in a sustainable way with our power and energy.
It's interesting you talk about that. Last week I was in Afghanistan at Bagram Base.
Now she tells us where she
Now
is.
I can tell you where you are. I can tell you after I come Bagram, which is Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. And we have a biofuel operation there. And we were walking through it. There are 4 dining facilities on that base. It's a major air base for operations in Afghanistan. And they are refining the oil, the cooking oil from those dining facilities into a biofuel. And the analysis after the first cost of shipping the equipment all the way into Afghanistan, 17-day return on investment.
Wow.
And so they're taking that biofuel and they are using it on base for various operations. And so, maybe it takes us a little while to do things. We're focused on the fight first, but ensuring that we're doing things in a productive manner and trying to make use of every resource stream that we have.
So let's talk about houses, right? Because this is really where this whole thing came together. The hotel that you built in Huntsville, and the fact that you have a bigger housing portfolio than HUD, which is...
I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's close.
Right. So it's, again, didn't find that on their website, but
most people don't realize that we do housing.
Right. So the intersection of those two things, is there a place for green building in your housing portfolio?
I would like to think so. We don't necessarily build houses. We offer loans and grants to those who are building houses in rural areas where you don't have large companies that can go into a small town or a small community and it's not profitable. Right. It's hard to attract business there. But I think, it's something to think about for the future, to think about requirements. Maybe there's an incentive if you're going to use, this. I think that would be great to have some kind of bonuses or incentives for that. I don't know if we've looked at that or not yet, but I think that could be kind of fun as a way to do that. Because we have single-family housing, multifamily housing in rural areas. So I think it's something we should think about.
So I think the incentive piece is really interesting. Fannie Mae announced last week or earlier this week, as part of their multifamily program, they're going to give a 10 basis point reduction to LEED certified multifamily facilities. So I think that that particular finance community has put their money where our mouths have been, the green building industry's mouths have been for the last several years. And I think that that's the type of thing that we can maybe build on going forward. And I guess the cost benefit analysis that you guys do when you're doing this type of stuff is similar, right? You're an owner, right? And your stewardship of all of, there's probably people who are not from the U.S. paying taxes here, but there's probably a lot of people who are. The stewardship of our tax dollars, and is that evaluation in terms of the lifespan of the building obviously is endemic in that work. But can you talk about a little bit about how you make that argument to the rest of the well, you're making it to an appropriator, right? So when you go up the hill, and you say you want to build that green building, split, right?
Well, it's more cost effective to own and operate for the long term. And what we've done, the Army's really good at training and equipping soldiers to fight this nation's wars. We are not necessarily the best home builders. So what we've done is we've privatized all of our housing, and we've got some great partners, and we've tasked them with the requirement to build the housing, maintain and operate it in a sustainable manner. And so that requirement requires them to build to LEED Home Silver level or higher, or equivalent standard. And so we have found that the energy consumption in our homes on Army bases has been reduced by over 20% because of the quality of construction and also behavior change incentives. We have found that using carrot and stick methodologies, the carrot, there's a reward if you use less energy in your home than neighboring homes, and it might be you get to pick something out of a catalog or you get a check at the end of the month. Stick, i.e. you use more, you're going to get a bill. And so those kind of methodologies have really worked, and our partners on our houses, on our bases, have done a phenomenal job of ensuring that they are sustainable now and into the future.
So it's apparent to me that the rest of the questions that are in this book here are going to stay in there, because I do want to have a couple minutes for questions from you guys. It's probably not all that often that people get a chance to do this. So come on up if you have a question. We can turn it over to you.
Hi, Jennifer Sanguinetti. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and I work with the University of British Columbia. And I would really like to encourage you to come up and visit our campus, where we have a CLT LEED Gold certified biomass energy center. We have our brand new energy center, which is just getting occupancy, which is also CLT. We have a 6-story CLT engineering and earth sciences building, which is around 100,000 square feet. And we're just starting construction on an 18-story wood frame building. So it's also going for LEED Gold. So please come and share your expertise and come and see what we've got going on up here.
I would love to come, but in the summer.
It's Vancouver. It's the same kind of climate as Seattle. Yeah. It's a little bit rainy, but you don't get snow or anything.
But maybe next year, at next year's Greenbuild, we could have a session talking about case histories in CLT, so that we can give you an opportunity to talk about your lessons learned to the benefit of the construction industry.
And we do have a lot. I mean, we have been choosing that technology because the province of British Columbia has a wood first policy. So as a public institution, we have been looking at innovative wood uses, and it's been fantastic for the British Columbia wood industry. And so speaking to your point about restarting wood and the wood industry,
The industry,
everything that
right.
goes with that, it's absolutely the place for public stewardship of funds, because all the benefits that you outlined there are absolutely well-founded, and government policy can really...
Great examples.
Thanks a lot.
Catherine, this is a question for you. On your 6-story wood structure in Huntsville, how are you handling the blast, resistance, and progressive collapse, if at all? And I have a follow-up question as well.
It was designed in, and that's something that we find that is inherent in the resiliency of the wood itself. So it's a 4-story structure. And actually, in retrospect, as we sat back and looked at the design, we probably over-designed it. So as we're looking at future generations, future iterations, we find that we can take out some of the structural mass and still have that resiliency that we're looking for in design.
And the second question, was it FSC wood?
Ask the guy in the front, Laura, who did the construction.
Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Cathy Broad. I'm the Sustainable Buildings Program Manager in Departmental Management at Krysta. And just as a point of information, kind of hearing myself back here, excuse me. As a point of information to Brendan's question on housing, we are primarily focusing on greening our 5,000 square foot and over buildings, largely offices, laboratories, a few visitor centers, and the Forest Service. And most of the housing is smaller than that. That said, while most of the housing is in the Forest Service, they have a mission that's very resource conservation oriented, and they do green all of their buildings from new construction on through operations and maintenance. So I just want to make the point that we are greening our buildings, again, focusing on the great big ones. Any really large housing, I've discovered, is under the domain of Department of Labor, even though we operate and maintain that. So we're working, we're working collaboratively with other agencies. And yes, we're greening them.
Great, thank you.
It's good.
Hi, oh, this is quite high. Romilly Madew, Green Building Council of Australia, and everyone usually says they get the Australian bit. I missed the first 20 minutes, Catherine, but did you talk about the leadership that you have taken internationally on working with the other NATO countries on net energy, zero water and waste? I think that might be of interest to others. So if you hadn't picked that up, I think that would be interesting to raise.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be convening the second NATO conference on net zero. We had one in Denmark almost 2 years ago, and this coming summer in, well, I guess it's about April, we're convening all the NATO countries and a couple of countries together to talk about net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste. It's all of the military departments, because we find in many countries the military owns and operates the majority or a very large majority of buildings and infrastructure and property. So when we get this group together, we're going to be sharing best practices across multiple countries. And so each military is going to be asked to bring 5 best practices and 5 challenge areas together so that we can all learn from each other, because we think there are a lot of great practices. I was in Australia in August talking with their Ministry of Defense about the great things that are going on there. It is amazing to me the technologies that we can bring together in a global economy. And that's why the CLT lessons learned from the other countries that are doing the work. And as you said, at times we're behind the times. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're the leader. But I find that imitation is the greatest form of flattery, so we can learn from the other industries. Right. But again, we need to address our building codes. Mm-hmm. to make sure that we're getting the right language into our codes to allow this kind of good design to take place, so that we don't have designers who do all the hard work and find they're not able to get a permit. So I think that's why this challenge, this building challenge that USDA is putting forward is going to help, and we hope that the science from the Construction Engineering Research Lab also contributes to good code design.
I think the green building industry has a pretty good track record of pushing the envelope. I remember having conversations with you about waterless urinals 15 years ago, as if people were never going to let that happen, and now it's like a thing that we can do all the time. All right, one more question, and then I've got one more closing thought for you guys.
Hi, I'm Annette. I work at Searle Construction and Research Lab. I actually did the study on the waterless urinals. We have been working at Fort Leonard Wood to do a sustainable food shed. So we're looking at a vertical farm. We're doing veterans to farmers training. We're working with USDA, getting local food. So it's kind of tying those ideas together. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Well, I thank you for doing that. I think, again, I talk about how we work with DOD in so many different ways, and you just mentioned a couple of them. With farmers markets is certainly an area, and having farm to base type, which you have local foods that are being used on bases. We work a lot with veterans. 200,000 military personnel retire every year. We're saying come into farming. A lot of them came from rural areas, came from farms and ranches. So we're working very closely as well with the TAPS program on the transitioning for military personnel. And I think that, maybe they'll have some interest in some of these issues as well. They'll understand how the bases work and the needs that are there. So they may bring some new ideas to us in our industry. So it's a great relationship. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks. All right, so last question. We started this week on Tuesday night. Gail Vittori won the Hanley Award. On Wednesday morning, I sat down and had a conversation with Elizabeth Colbert, who won the Pulitzer Prize for her book, The Sixth Extinction. I'm sitting with you both, so I'm not lacking, really, really badass female role models. Can we bring the picture up, though? And neither is my daughter. This is Harper. She's 6. The question that I have for you guys, which is really very selfish, what can I do to raise her in a way that instills in her the sense of service that you guys have? This is a profoundly generous thing that you guys do, the service that you provide for the U.S. in very different ways. But what can I do to make her a badass like you guys?
Well, she's adorable, by the way. Thanks. She's just precious. I bet she's a handful, though. She looks like she has a little energy there.
That picture's about right? That's her.
No telling what's going on in that brain. There are a couple, I spend a lot of time with young women trying to talk to them about having careers in agriculture. That there's a great opportunity. They've been involved in agriculture. We hadn't always valued their contributions. So I think a lot about that. First, one thing I always say to young women is you can do anything. That's what's so great about this country, so great about what's happening is no one is going to say no to you, and don't let them if they try. As far as public service, I think it's not just for girls, it's for everyone. That we have, I say this to college campuses, to 4-H groups, FFA, you name it, whomever will listen, that we do have the greatest government in the world. I believe that. And the reason it is so good is because we have people who are involved in it. People who will take pay cuts, people who will get involved at the political level, but others who will serve and not have the opportunities they might on the monetary side to make careers in our government. And it is about giving back, it's about serving. That's what makes us so rich, it makes us so strong, is really that ability to give back. And I do believe, for every ounce you put in, you get a pound in return. I learned that a long time ago. But the opportunity is there, but it's a privilege, and it is an honor to serve. And whether you're in the military, I was not going to serve in the military, so I'm giving back at USDA. Right. But just instilling that, I think you're probably doing that on your own, and I commend you for doing that, and good luck with her. You're going to have your hands full.
Well, I think the best thing that you can do is lean forward versus leaning back. And I think too often women and girls step back and wait to be asked. And I think that there is an opportunity to step forward and say what you want to do and speak your mind, and that's okay. It's whether you do it in public service or whether you do it in the private sector. I talked to a young woman yesterday at the Women in Green breakfast who said there was a project she really wanted to work on and she didn't get it. And she made a comment to the coworker, and the coworker said, well, you didn't say you were interested. She said, well, I was waiting to be asked. And that just speaks volumes. If there's something you're interested in, step forward and say, I'd like to do that. I mean, I remember when we were forming the U.S. Green Building Council, I was not a silent participant in that. We had a great team and many late nights, and I think everyone contributed. So you can't be shy, and you need to speak your mind, and your daughter does.
Yes.
And I think that's a great quality. So I think we're breeding a next generation, especially in the United States, and I appreciate your comments on that because we're a country that's built on diversity. None of us, none of our families, very few of us, I should say, families came from here. We're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation that brought together the best from many countries to develop a new land. We're the innovators. And that's a characteristics that you have in Americans, is that we all came from someplace else and we contribute to the common good. And so that's something I think we need to remember. It is our diversity that makes us stronger. So when you have a diverse team, when you're in a diverse organization, that organization is going to be better and stronger.
I think we may all be working for Harper one day.
I hope so. I would be, I know I already am. So thank you guys both so very much. Wonderful, wonderful.
It's fun.